You're listening to 5 Things with Lisa Birnbach.
It's Lisa Birnbach. And before I go any further, I want to wish any of you who celebrate the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah a very happy and healthy New Year. Don't forget to vote. Now, you'll never make money betting on New York versus Los Angeles. I learned that and I keep relearning it. Just when I finished defending the obituary writers about writing their essays on New York, the West Coast burns brighter, harder, worse than ever before. It's biblical. Now, I'm still in California at the end of my month-long visit to see my exhibits. And I am happy to be here to get a sense of what their lives are like, to have more than a few days to really have downtime with them as well as hyped up time, to see what their lives are like and to extend our relationships in new ways. And to tell you the truth, I don't even mind driving. I can find my way from our rented house to the baby without a GPS. I consider that a victory. But to get back to the true issues at hand, the West Coast is on fire. Until this president took office, I always had the sense that America did things right, that our brilliant founders had created a document and a democracy that was durable and reliable and planned for every contingency possible in our Constitution. It was my American privilege, and I took that, as one does, for granted. Now, by disdaining and flouting science, this president and his team, and don't forget, a lot of the people in high positions are his former bodyguard, his son-in-law, donors who have no training or background, there's a handbag designer involved, are playing the most dangerous game of Russian roulette ever. You burn if you're blue, and if you're red, you go to a super-spreading rally instead. This is a bad dream, and I go to sleep with it every night. I wake up with it every morning. I pray, really pray that it ends. Conversations on both coasts now include the conversation, where can we go? What do we do? How do we stay here? And you know, the haze and the ash and the particulates from these fires don't just affect people on the West Coast. They've traveled to the East Coast, including Palm Beach, Florida. They travel over the Atlantic Ocean to Europe and even Africa. We are all suffering, and the American president is largely to blame. He's hurting the entire planet. What occasionally makes me hopeful are the voices and the protests begun by the young people. They're doers. My admiration for Malala, for Greta Thunberg, and for the survivors of the Parkland mass shooting are boundless. My guest this week is a young, active, wonderful, brilliant young woman named Amelia Nierenberg. She's the co-writer of the New York Times Coronavirus Schools Briefing newsletter. After she graduated with a bachelor and master's in 4 years from Yale in intellectual history, she won a job at the Associated Press West Africa Bureau in Senegal, and she worked there for a while and then won a fellowship in the first class of New York Times Fellows. She worked at the food desk. She is just one of the many young people who give me hope. But before we talk to Amelia, here are my 5 things. Number 1, enjoying the fruits and vegetables from one's own garden. I must say, there's something extremely lovely, and it makes me feel self-sufficient when I can trot out to the backyard of this rented house and pick a lemon with which to make salad dressing. I mean, yes, I could drive to the store. It's not a big deal, but there's something so just easy. Not just easy, but I grew it. I planted it. I raised it. And now I'm squeezing it over my fish. Well, I don't have a garden in real life, but it's on my wish list, whether my next home is a cottage with a garden or a terrace in Manhattan. I know that I want to grow fruits and vegetables. Number 2, the Citizen app. My stepdaughter told me about it in New York. It's a way to find out what's going on in your vicinity. In Los Angeles, let me tell you, twice yesterday, I was trying to drive somewhere and where the GPS sent me, I could not go because there were police stakeouts. This is twice in one day. Plus, there are helicopters overhead a lot. So this app tells you what's going on and it doesn't tell you who they're staking out, but it's a lot easier to look at the app than ask a policeman in the midst of a sting, "Whoa, Mr. Policeman, who are you looking for?" Number 3, vegan and gluten-free bakeries. Exhibit B has to avoid gluten. Exhibit A and A1 are trying to live dairy-free. Los Angeles has really good bakeries that make these alternative breads and pastries. Good for you, LA. Number 4, a standby, reading. I'm a little overwhelmed by the news. I don't watch the news on a kind of vacation as I do when I'm home, but also I'm so overwhelmed by the plenitude of streaming series, reruns, movies, documentaries, etc., etc. And yes, I haven't even started watching Breaking Bad. So many nights I succumb to a book and nothing on a screen. Number 5, science. Take it from me. I hated science class. I tried to get out of science class. I'd go to the bathroom during science class. But science is why the fires, why the pandemic, the global warming. Ignoring science has put the planet in peril. We need a president who believes in science. And it sort of sickens me to say that because empirically, how do you disbelieve what is provable? Anyway, please vote. Coming up, Amelia Nierenberg. Don't go away. Welcome to the program. This is Lisa Birnbach, 5 Things That Make Life Better. My guest today is Amelia Nierenberg. Amelia is a graduate of the first ever New York Times Fellows Program, and she continues to write for the New York Times, mostly about food, but also about, I would say, the zeitgeist and anxiety. Welcome, Amelia.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Wouldn't you say? I mean, it's interesting that food and anxiety seem to be the 2 things, plus politics, that everybody is thinking about right now. Who would have thought?
I know. I mean, my beat, food is always political and food is always national. But come March 15th, I think it was top of everyone's mind and has sort of stayed that way. Yeah, it's been the 6 months of food for sure.
For sure. Now, I was surprised, I guess, spoiler alert, Amelia and her family, her parents are very good friends of ours. And of all the things that you could have been assigned, having just come back to New York from a year in Senegal, is that correct?
Yeah, 6 months, yeah.
6 months in Senegal, probably not reporting on food, and having written about politics and culture in other places and at Yale where you went to school, suddenly food. And I thought, oh, Amelia's not going to like that. But you turned it into something very different, a platform for culture, I think.
That's very flattering. Yeah, I had not really written about food before. I love to cook, and I had written a story about a food blog renaissance happening in Senegal, where African people in the African diaspora were coming back to try and mine cultural recipes on vacation. But no, I never really written about food. And when the food editors asked me if I wanted to join the team, I was sort of surprised, but now I know the difference between bake and broil and braise and baste. I did not know on the first day of work. So,
oh, that's funny. Well, how did that work? How did the assignments get meted out in the fellowship program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the New York Times, mostly as far as I can tell, runs on pitches. Reporters are expected to own their beat and come to their editors and say, this is news, this is what we should be writing about. we're sort of both researchers and storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And since I didn't have a culinary background and I'd never written a recipe before and I've never worked in a restaurant, the stories that I could pitch about food were about food as a window into climate change, which I do know about, or food as a window into politics, or food as a window into identity. And so those were the stories that I pitched. But I've written some recipes since, but it's for sure not my forte.
Well, you've had two very famous recipes that have gone extremely viral that I know of. One is your recipe for focaccia art,
Yes.
which has become, as you people say, a thing, right?
I think
It's become a thing.
Become a thing, yeah. The most supportive corner of Instagram, little known secret, is Breadstagram, Baker's Instagram.
It's called Breadstagram?
In the biz.
Interesting.
All everyone I know,
inside detail.
Insider baseball. Everyone I know who's a baker, everyone I know who cares about bread, has all of these baker friends across the world who are super supportive, and they tell each other their different hydration percentages, and they talk about spelt, and it's just this whole internet community. And I followed a couple of the accounts and saw focaccia gardens, and it seemed like it was bubbling, pun intended, unfortunately, on Instagram. And yeah, now people started decorating their focaccia, and they look like little bouquets. It's really beautiful. It was a really nice kind of craft plus baking project for quarantine.
Was and probably still is. What is the most amazing focaccia garden you have seen? Could you describe it?
I could. I'm contractually obligated to say my mom's, in part because she's my mom and she will listen to this, and in part because it was actually pretty impressive. When we were testing out the recipe, they were my test subjects. I moved back in with my parents, as all good millennials did at the start of quarantine, and my parents took very different tactics. My dad made what he called a focaccia Kandinsky, very expressive, no rhyme or reason. And my mom got like a scalpel and was cutting individual fish out of purple potatoes and slicing up red peppers, and she created an undersea garden with seaweed and anemones, and very expressive, very aquatic. But a lot of people do daisies and sunflowers and designs. And I mean, one of the joys of cooking is that it's very visual, and one of the joys of this form is that it's very visual. And I think people really let their imaginations run wild.
Well, and also it combines one's desire for crafting with one's desire for baking, with one's desire for eating. So that took off. And then didn't you write a recipe for making ice cream in a glass jar, in a mason jar?
I did, yeah. It's truly the easiest thing in the world if you have forearm strength, which I don't, so it's actually pretty difficult. But
it's actually for me it would be impossible. So I guess it's not so easy.
It's I mean, the shake weight craze is one of the funniest like capitalism workout crazes ever, and I felt very much as though I were in my short-lived shake weight attempt when I was doing this. But you basically put a little bit, I think it's like a cup of cream and a pinch of salt and tablespoon of vanilla extract and 2 tablespoons of sugar. You should check the recipe that I wrote. I don't know if those are the actual amounts, but
okay, we'll put it on the website. Okay. Sugar, salt, cream. Yeah. Do you put ice in it? I wasn't sure.
You don't. It's sugar, salt, cream, heavy cream, and vanilla. And you freeze it. You have to make sure there's enough room because it will expand, and you don't want to blow up the jar in your freezer, which someone did, and I felt pretty bad about that. But you can basically, I mean, that's the base. You'll get a vanilla ice cream. But people grind up berries and nuts, and they put jam. A woman sent me a Instagram today. She did coffee and cardamom, which sounds great. I tried a lemon and olive oil one, which sort of worked. But I wouldn't recommend that. But it's it works. It's good to do with kids. A lot of people do it with their kids, and they get their kids to shake it for them, and that kills at least
Uh,
15 minutes of quarantine day. So
it sounds perfect for that. It's
yeah,
fitness and it's ice cream all at once. But
and fun.
let's talk more about the way indigenous cultures have thought of food. And there seems to be a renaissance of people saying, these seeds grew here. We're going to cook with these seeds. There was a story you wrote about Appalachian cuisine and how this very poor part of the country does have a food heritage. Does every place have a food heritage?
What an interesting question. Yeah, I think every place does have a food heritage because everyone has a heritage. And a food heritage is informed both by cultural forces, what your culture's beliefs about purity and how your culture spends time and division of labor. Food heritage is something that you can look to as how families are structured, how celebrations are held. But also every place has a food heritage because every culture has geographic roots, and the different soils and the different environment and the different seeds that are available give people different ingredients. And I think that there's a movement right now for people across the world and across ethnic groups to reimagine their own autonomy over their food heritage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a way to be proud of where you come from and who you are, I suppose.
Yeah, I think food is probably the most. I'm a food writer, so I'm biased, but I think food is probably the most visceral way that you can make history alive that I can think of. Because if you so often when I speak to chefs, especially chefs who are looking to foreground and celebrate and explore their culture and their heritage in their recipes, I ask them, how did you become a chef? It's always an interesting question to ask a chef because mostly it's I was with my grandma. But so
Mm-hmm.
many people I speak to are also talking about how, if you follow a recipe, you're putting inside your mouth and you're tasting and you're smelling and you're chewing the exact same things that the people who are your forebears 200 years ago tasted and smelled and chewed. It's this intimate, tactile way to feel like you came from somewhere.
And it's a new way for a lot of people. I mean, it's not something I have actually thought about, except maybe when traveling. When you travel and you are immersed in a totally different cuisine, you do think
Mhm.
about it much more than you do when you're eating at home or being less mindful. I mean, a hamburger is a hamburger in a way, as opposed to what a tangine in Morocco or something, and as opposed to a tangine in New York. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. Do you think that the common eater is that conscious of history or location when they eat?
I think that so it's a really good question. I think that if we're talking about the common eater, I think that there are multiple. It's a hard construction because I grew up in New York. We both live in New York, so the idea of the common eater is in New York. Anyone who lives in New York who has, with the swipe of a Metro card, pretty much every cuisine in the world at our
Right.
fingertips. So it's a pretty exceptional example. I think that you don't think about food as heritage necessarily until you're confronted with foods that are of a different heritage. So, a
Mm.
hamburger is an intrinsic part of American heritage. It was, I think, apocryphally invented in New Haven in the 1800s at Louis, and now a hamburger is one of the most global symbols of American cuisine. And what a hamburger represents is our focus on meat and our idea of eating with our hands and kind of an informalness that's inherent to American cuisine and a casualness
Mhm.
that's inherent in our recipes. And so a hamburger carries as much cultural resonance as a tagine. But I don't know if we'd think about it as culinary heritage if you're somewhere with hamburgers, if that makes sense. I'm thinking
Right.
when I was living in Dakar, Senegal, most restaurants in Senegal serve Senegalese food. And there are two pizza places that I knew of in Senegal. And when I was and pizza's an Italian American food, but I think it is probably one of the most American foods and certainly one of the most New York foods. And the two times that I was most homesick in Senegal, I went and got myself a pizza, um,
Uh-huh.
and it tasted like home. And I think that it's one of the most emotional ways that you can feel as though you have a home
Yes.
is to have familiar food in your mouth.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's right. And it makes total sense. The urgency though, there's a feeling of urgency, isn't there, to connect with one's heritage to it's part of our sort of unspoken drive to be more authentic.
I think that's a very good way to phrase it, and I agree. I think that in the past decade, it seems as though there is now a premium on intentionality. Uh,
Mm,
and the more that you do on purpose and thoughtfully, and the more that you consume on purpose and thoughtfully, the more you are engaging with the zeitgeist of consumption. And I think that you are right that in the past probably 2 years, food has intensified in that realm of sort of intentional consumption. Before, there was Nouvelle Cuisine and Michael Pollan, and people were, I think, on the whole, mainstream folks were thinking about food as local and environmental. But one of the things that the architecture of Instagram and the rise of TikTok and the proliferation of YouTube has given, as well as Netflix's push into culinary television, is that
mhm.
there are more types of food cooked by more people easily available. Um,
Yes.
and I think that we're in a moment right now, in part because of screw ups at the highest levels of food media, and in part because of daily missteps at lower levels of food media, where who gets to talk about ingredients and who gets to talk about dishes and who should be talking about those ingredients and dishes is a conversation that's happening. And I think that that is informed by the way that home cooks have been using technology for the past 3 to 5 years, and I think it's only gonna intensify.
Are you talking about cultural misappropriation in the kitchen sort of thing?
I don't know if I would call it misappropriation, but I think that there has been an idea for a very long time, which I ascribed to when I was much younger, and still am learning how to talk about it and how I feel about that. If you ate something and you enjoyed it and you knew about food in general, you had an understanding of what it was and what it meant. And I think that that is true. Everyone is an eater, and everyone's tastes and eating matters, and I wanna know how different foods resonate with different people, but
Mhm.
food is, as we are talking about, a cultural artifact, and just as I would privilege a scholar of French literature's opinion on Molière more than someone who knows very little about French and French culture and French literature. I would want to know about a tagine, for example, from a Moroccan chef, because a Moroccan chef, I think, in general, would have the understanding of the terroir of the ingredients, of the,
Mhm.
sociological who
Of
cooked
the
this
meaning of
before.
of
Yeah.
the ingredients, yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like a more responsible way for everyone to understand what they're eating.
Yeah, I'm with you there. There are things that I have questions about, and I think I'm very glad that your generation has sparked these questions.
Mhm.
But, if I were to make a tagine or a taco or sushi,
Yeah.
I would know, I guess, A, that I like this food and admire it, and B, that it wasn't mine, that it
Mhm.
wasn't as natural to me, or it wouldn't be mine to own. I'm just using it in a way, as opposed to if I make a brisket where I feel like I could be the queen of brisket if I wanted.
I'm gonna call you
But
that
there
next
was
time you make me a brisket.
Please do, please do. But then, there was a white woman who opened a Chinese restaurant in New York this year and was skewered for it. She closed the restaurant.
Mhm.
The dining hall at Kenyon College, I think it was, or Oberlin, I guess, made what was it? Some
I
ethnic
I
food.
remember this, but I don't remember what it was, but I do
I
remember
don't
it was
remember what it was. I believe it was
dramatic.
a Mexican dish, and the students went on strike. I mean, there has to be a kind of tacit permission to explore other cuisines. Maybe it comes with a statement, maybe it doesn't. A lot of people listening may think that's too politically correct and staccato. It just prevents you from smoothly entering the kitchen and cooking whatever you like. And it's our right to cook whatever we like. That's in the First Amendment too, in a way. But yet, we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Where do you land in that conversation?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that if you like tacos and you wanna make tacos for dinner, I don't think anyone's gonna jump down your throat and tell you that you have no right to make tacos. I think that the idea of staccato versus smooth is a really interesting construction to use to talk about this, because I think that the smoothness of appropriation is in part what folks are pushing against right now.
Right,
Um
right. That's well put. Yeah.
Bon Appetit has been doing, like, a big overhaul of their top notes, which are the short paragraphs on top of a recipe that before you get the ingredients and the steps that kind of
Hmm.
say, "This is this food, this is pair it with this comes from here," and I think they're doing kind of an internal overhaul or review process. I think that smoothness isn't something that we should necessarily be prioritizing anymore, um,
Gotcha.
because I think smoothness is in some ways sort of privileges people for whom many other things have been smooth,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
require if something is smooth, someone has had to file it down because everything is by nature kind of jagged, especially
Jagged.
in
Yeah.
culture, and so when we're talking about smoothing things out, I think that a lot of chefs whose cuisines have been cooked by white chefs for to say it blankly, have been the ones who have had to smooth it out, and I think now it's incumbent upon the white chefs to, like, understand and deal and process and reflect. But I think that also, like, I'm a New York Jew, Ashkenazi, and I cook from around the world, and I have a very extensive spice cabinet, and I know how to use them, and I fully intend to keep doing that because I love those flavors, and I think it's totally responsible to do that as long as you, like, know what you're talking about. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
It's
I
really
mean,
hard, you know?
it's hard now. Processes and activities and exercises that seem to be simple. You go buy a book in a bookstore, and it's the cuisine of Northern Africa, or it's the cuisine of Harlem, or it's the cuisine of Yucatan or Thailand. I mean, it just
Yeah.
seemed like you could do that. One could do that. And also that the chefs from those worlds were encouraging other people, let's say white people who buy those expensive cookbooks,
Mhm.
to do it, give it a shot. Of course, what's interesting when you talk about smoothing down the jagged edges, some ingredients may be very difficult to find.
Right.
And
In
you
certain
have
neighborhoods.
in certain neighborhoods of
Yeah.
in certain quarters. So you may not really be able to make that drunken fish, or you may not
Totally.
be able to do it as, maybe you have to find a substitute thing for an ingredient. But nevertheless, you don't want to feel bad for doing it, and also you want to keep the revenue stream going to those chefs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a really good point because I think watching food Twitter, a lot of home cooks who have really good intentions and wanna explore, and, when you cook something from a different country or a different culture, it's like the easiest and most fun passport that you can have without a plane ticket.
Right.
I think that a lot of people are feeling a little confused or sidelined, or I saw one chef home cook describe the feeling of a recipe that she really liked cooking as being sort of condemned as a betrayal. And I think that everyone has a responsibility to understand themselves as a political agent in a broader world, whatever. But I think that this is where a lot of the criticism of food media, both, blogs, newspapers, magazines, and cookbook publishing is merited. Because if you are a chef, a home cook, and you really want to make a tagine, to go back to the example that we keep using, and you go and you buy what you think is a really authoritative anthropological book on Moroccan food, and the book is, not intelligently researched, or it's sort of half-heartedly researched, or it orientalizes or essentializes Moroccan
Mhm.
food, or it's written for, like, the white lady in Indiana that it knows, like, the cookbook publisher knows will buy this, and you think you're making a real tagine, and then you
Mhm.
feed it to your Moroccan friend, and your Moroccan friend can't taste any flavor or remnants of home in it. You know, a good faith effort is a good faith effort, and it is up to food media, of which I'm a part, to equip our home cooks with the, frankly, theory and context to cook better, both better in terms of taste, better in terms of ingredient sources, and better in terms of cultural respect.
Well, that's a great place to close. I think it's a whole new world for us.
Mm.
And I think respect is probably what it's about. And I do think that I've fallen into the trap of taking pictures of some of the food I've made because I never was a cook until quarantine.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to stop wearing a beret when I make French food, and I'm going to stop wearing a sombrero when I make Mexican food, and no more schmatas on my head for any reason. No, I'm kidding, of course. I just think that it's something to keep in mind. I think people
Yeah,
who've been cooking in their home for years and years, and they've discovered Ottolenghi or they've discovered
for sure.
Marcella
Yeah.
Hazan, go to it. These are great chefs who
Yeah.
who want to help, but just be aware that you are cooking food of another culture.
I think it's basically the same premise as music. Like, if you love a song, listen to the song, but if you really love a song and you want to understand the song, research the artist, research the movement, listen to other albums that are related to the album that you love. But, the reason that we cook, the reason that we listen to music, the reason that we engage with beauty is so that our lives feel and are better things to live. And so I think if you like are cooking a recipe that you love, you probably want to know more about it anyway. And I don't think that home cooks should feel attacked, because I don't think that people really I don't know that many people that place any blame with home cooks. I think it's much more about structural ways that food is talked about, which is changing, which is good. But like, if you like
Which
what
is
you're
changing.
cooking, you should cook it.
Well, if
Like,
I
do
can
it
eat
do
it,
what you
I can
love.
cook it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Amelia, this has been a great conversation, and it's something that really your generation is teaching us. And I appreciate it because I wasn't aware of all the many, many ways we have been, I would say, micro oppressors. And yet, this is 5 things that make life better. And you provided me with a fantastic list, and the first one I've never heard of. I don't know what it is. And because of Michael's allergies, I will never be able to cook with it. But what is it? Number one, crunchy garlic with chili oil.
Oh, it's so good. The H-Mart has opened near my parents' house, so I still feel like I'm living in in a metropolis. Um,
Uh-huh.
it's so yummy. It's not it's spicy in terms of heat, but it doesn't sting, and it's this kind of it's crunchy garlic stuff, and I put it on everything. I put it on my eggs, I put it in soup, I put it on like bread with sourdough with a little butter. It's just this lovely, zingy, textural, yummy thing that Michael, because he's allergic to garlic, cannot go anywhere near.
Now, so it's something you shake out of a bottle onto it's like a spice bottle that you buy?
No, it's like a paste.
Oh.
It's a little jar. You get like a little spoon, and I usually scoop up like a quarter sized amount, and I put it on 2 eggs, and it makes my eggs more fun. I am hot sauce appreciative, but not hot sauce inclusive, because it makes me feel bad. But this is one of the ways that I have found that I can add like real spice and real heat to my food that doesn't ruin the rest of my day.
Oh,
So
very good to know
yeah,
about. I'm very,
a
very good to know.
delightful little jar that I love to have in my kitchen.
The del And we're gonna link, our listeners and readers to some information about that darling little jar, on our website at lisabirnbach.com. Okay, number 2, I'm
Yeah,
very, very, very curious about this.
okay. It is the bra that I'm wearing right now.
It's made by Negative Underwear, and I get emails from them, and I mean, the last 3 years have seen, a giant, renaissance of sort of non-industrial bras, all these companies that are rethinking women's underwear, and
Yeah.
Negative is one of them that's doing really well. And someone else who was very small-breasted told me that she liked Negative, but, it didn't make a difference to me because, it was not applicable. But
Right.
your recommendation means something to me.
Well, I have large breasts, which is not something I ever thought I'd say on air, but I do.
Uh-huh.
And I have been so envious of the bralette trend because I would love to wear a really comfortable bra that is still pretty and doesn't have an underwire that, stabs me in the sternum when I'm interviewing a mayor, like which has
Yeah.
happened. And when I was in Poland, Poland is known for. I was reporting in Poland. Poland is known for their lingerie. I went to all the bra stores in Krakow and Warsaw. This was like my activity when didn't know what to do when I was reporting, and bought very comfortable underwire bras there, but have just been so wired with my bras for so long.
Uh-huh.
And one of my best friends has very large breasts, to the point of like back pain discomfort. And she recommended this to me, and I bought one, and it's so nice to feel comfortable and pretty at the same time in my underwear, which is not something that I've ever been able to do. And now I can, and I think I'm going to buy like 5 more.
Well, yeah, note to self,
Yeah.
write to Negative Underwear ASAP.
Yeah, no, it's a delight. It's really a delight, and I think I'm excited for more wireless bras in my future.
Well, especially those of us who are working from home, there's no need to be stabbed when you're at home,
That
in
is true.
particular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do wanna say I'm wearing an underwire bra right now, and the first month or so of the pandemic and the shut-in, I did not wear a bra ever, but now I'm trying to normalize.
Bra wearing again.
Yeah, I am. I
I have
am.
friends that are doing are have started putting on makeup every day again, which I
Oh,
will not do, but I don't
no.
wear makeup in general, but
Right,
I
same
think it
here.
really helps
Yeah, whatever
feel.
you have to
Yeah.
do to feel good in your morning and in your day, you do,
Yeah.
because that's the most important. Okay, number 3, I'm envious of this one.
Rapid turnaround COVID testing. I was inspired by your number 5 every week, Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci.
Yeah,
Yeah,
who should be, number 1 through 5 on my list too. But
yes.
yeah, one of my mother's best friends has her family has a house in Vermont, and I was feeling, as I think everyone who's living in a city is feeling, very claustrophobic.
Mhm.
And I asked, my friend Sam if he wanted to come to this house with me, and so we got negative coronavirus tests in 36 hours, and now we can hug each other, which is great.
How did you get a 36-hour turnaround in New York?
I went to there was a clinic, I think it's called Cure on 103rd and Broadway. I can look it up right now, and it was the easiest thing in the world. The nurse sang to me. Let me look it up,
Aw.
as she put the swab in my nose.
Yeah, that's some swab, isn't it?
It's intense. Cure Urgent Care. There are 2
Wow.
locations in Manhattan, and they turned it around in 36 hours, and the nurse sang to me. So I will be driving to 103rd Street every time I need to hug my friends until we have
That's
a
a
vaccine.
that's a great tip, yeah, because mine took a rapid 9 days. I
Yeah,
and as I've since learned, I could have caught it in those 9 days.
you could've. You could've.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Number 4.
I had never seen this movie. I watched it last night. I thought it was fantastic. It's called Manto.
I've never even heard of it,
I haven't
Amelia.
either. My friend Ram, who's here, is from India, and he was telling us that we were asking him a lot of questions about partition, and he said we should watch this movie. And it's about a famous Urdu writer named Sadat Hassan Manto, and he was very radical, and he was sort of a very big star in India before partition, and he was a film writer, and then he was part of the migration of Muslims to Pakistan
Mhm.
after partition. And it's a beautiful movie. It's interspersed with a biographical story of his own life and sort of imaginings of excerpts of his short stories, and just as a movie about displacement and culture and identity and a part of the world that I don't know anything about, really, it was very, very, very moving and reminded me of stories and reporting and kind of the universal experience of your home not being yours anymore,
Yes.
which happens whenever you immigrate. So I really enjoyed it, and it's the movie I watched last night, so that's why I'm recommending it now. But it is making me really happy. I've been thinking about it in a way that you only do when you watch a truly good film.
Truly, truly, I couldn't agree with you more. And finally, number 5, the first half hour of your morning.
Yeah, in the start of the quarantine, which I think everyone did, if I had to be online at 9, I woke up at 8:45 and just, showered and brushed my teeth and started my day. But before quarantine, before the pandemic, if I had to be at work at 9, I woke up at 8 or 7:15 or 7:30 and had a
Mhm.
whole morning to myself. And I had breakfast and read and whatever. And I think that the ease of quarantine at first, it felt as though I'd be saving an extra 2 hours every day from my putting on clothing and taking off clothing and going to the train and,
Mhm.
whatever. But
Right.
I hated the feeling of kind of the porousness between sleep and work. And so I have started treating my first 45 minutes, hour of the day as if I were still going to work and I had I have my tea and I read my book and whatever. I'm not putting on an underwire bra or putting on mascara, but
Right. Right.
still having
But
like the time of being a person before I become a person in front of a computer. And it's been great.
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Amelia, it is just a treat talking to you. You are such an interesting thinker.
Thank you. This has been so fun. It's been so fun to do this with you and talk about this. A lot of what we talked about has been swirling but inarticulated in my mind, and it's been really helpful to sharpen that. Thank you
Well,
for having me on.
a real pleasure. You've been listening to 5 Things That Make Life Better with me, Lisa Birnbach. My guest has been Amelia Nierenberg, a writer for the New York Times and a graduate of their first ever fellowship program. Where would you like people to find you, Amelia, if they want to contact you on social media?
I'm on Twitter. If you type in Amelia Nierenberg, Nierenberg, you'll find me. And my Twitter bio has my email, or you can DM me or smoke signals, whatever works.
Excellent. You can find this podcast wherever you find podcasts, really, wherever. And please listen. Go to my blog at lisabirnbach.com. You'll find links to everything that we discussed today, including crunchy garlic with chili oil. And the last thing I want to say is that this podcast is produced in New York City by thefieldtv.com. My editor is Kevin Watkins. My team is Michael Port, Spressa Arucci, Boko Haft, and Sam Haft. And for now, stay cool, stay tart, as my friend Diana urged, wear mask, and act natural. Bye-bye.
That was 5 Things with Lisa Birnbach. New episodes every Friday, if she remembers.